It's so brave of you to come all alone, especially to a family Christmas party." The man sneered, standing next to his new wife in front of a giant, glittering Christmas tree. He had invited his ex-wife to his mansion specifically to mock her for being childless, enjoying the muffled laughter from his guests. What they didn't know was she hadn't come alone, and she was about to introduce his 4 secret sons. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. "I want this year's party to be the one they remember for decades," Thomas Mitchell said, swirling his glass of scotch. "Especially Sarah." Victoria Mitchell looked up from her tablet where she'd been scrolling through designer Christmas decorations. At 29 years old, her blonde hair fell in perfect waves around her shoulders, her manicure flawless as she tapped the screen. "Sarah? Your ex-wife? Sarah? Why would you invite her?" Victoria's voice carried a hint of annoyance. Thomas smiled, the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. At 42, he maintained the confident posture of a man accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted. "Because, darling, what's the point of success if the people who doubted you never see it?" December in Greenwich, Connecticut transformed the wealthy enclave into a winter showcase. The Mitchell estate sat on 3 acres of manicured grounds, the 8,000-square-foot mansion visible from the private road through a line of bare oak trees. Inside, Thomas stood at the window of his home office watching the first snow of the season begin to fall. "Mr. Mitchell, the year-end reports are ready for your review," his assistant said, placing a leather portfolio on his desk. "And the board members confirmed their attendance for next week's party." "Excellent, Margaret. Any word from Sarah Collins?" Thomas asked, his attention still on the snow. "Yes, sir. She accepted the invitation this morning." Thomas turned, his face brightening. "Did she? How interesting." After Margaret left, Thomas picked up his phone and dialed. "Robert, she's coming. Sarah actually RSVP'd yes." Robert Daniels, Thomas's business partner at Mitchell and Daniels Investment Group, paused before responding. "I'm not sure inviting your ex-wife to your Christmas party is your wisest decision, Tom." "Nonsense! Victoria and I have the perfect life now, the perfect house, the perfect marriage. We're even doing fertility treatments," Thomas said. "Sarah needs to see what she missed out on by failing me." "She didn't fail you, Thomas. You two couldn't have children together. That's not the same." "It's exactly the same," Thomas interrupted. "A woman's most basic function is to provide children. She couldn't. I moved on. End of story." Robert sighed. "Just be civil, all right? Sarah was always kind to everyone." "Of course I'll be civil," Thomas said. "I'm always the perfect host." After hanging up, Thomas walked through his mansion to find Victoria in their vast kitchen, discussing the party menu with their private chef. The kitchen gleamed with marble and stainless steel, designed more for show than actual cooking. "I want the lobster canapes, the imported beluga caviar, and make sure there's enough Dom Perignon for everyone," Victoria instructed. She looked up as Thomas entered. "Darling, Chef Pascal thinks we should serve the chocolate soufflés individually. Doesn't that sound perfect?" "Whatever you think is best," Thomas said, kissing her cheek. "The invitations went out yesterday. 200 of New England's most influential people will be here, including your ex-wife, apparently," Victoria said, her tone sharp. "Why would you want her here?" Thomas poured himself a glass of water. "Because everyone knows our story. How I had to leave her because she couldn't give me children. Now they can all see how much better my life is with you." Victoria's expression softened. She walked over and straightened Thomas's already perfect tie. "You're right. And when we announce our fertility treatment is working, it will be perfect." "Exactly. Sarah will finally understand what a mistake she was in my life." 3 days later, Thomas sat at his corner office overlooking Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided a panoramic view of the city 42 stories below. He scanned the latest market reports while half listening to his assistant reviewing his schedule. Your 3 o'clock called to reschedule, but the Anderson account meeting is confirmed for 4. And Mrs. Mitchell's event planner called about the ice sculpture for the party. Tell Victoria to handle the ice sculpture. I trust her judgment, Thomas said, not looking up from his computer. A knock at the door interrupted them. Robert Daniels entered carrying a folder. Thomas, got a minute? The Wilson portfolio needs your signature. After Margaret left, Robert closed the door. So, Sarah's really coming to your party? Yes. Surprised me too, Thomas said, leaning back in his leather chair. I expected her to decline. Maybe she's moved on, Robert suggested. Found happiness. Thomas laughed. Doubtful. Last I heard, she's still single. No children, teaching at some university. Hardly the life she dreamed of. Not everyone measures success the same way, Tom. They should, Thomas replied coldly. What's the point of life without leaving a legacy? Later that evening, Thomas returned to Greenwich. The security gate swung open as his black Mercedes approached. The mansion was lit up against the early darkness, windows glowing warmly. Inside, Victoria supervised a team arranging Christmas decorations. A 12-foot tree dominated the grand entrance, while garlands of pine and holly adorned the sweeping staircase. The decorator suggested white and gold for this year's theme, Victoria said as Thomas entered. The crystal chandeliers will reflect everything beautifully. Thomas nodded approvingly. It's magnificent. Our guests will be impressed. He walked to the bar and poured himself a drink. Did you handle the seating arrangements like we discussed? Yes. Sarah will be at table 7 with the Hendersons, the Blakes, and the Rossis. All have small children they never stop talking about, Victoria said with a smile. I made sure of it. Thomas clinked his glass against hers. Perfect. That night, Thomas lay awake beside his sleeping wife, thinking about his previous marriage. He remembered the day he told Sarah he wanted a divorce. They had been sitting in their doctor's office after yet another failed fertility treatment. I can't do this anymore, he had said, not looking at her tear-stained face. I want children. You can't give them to me. It's that simple. Thomas, please, Sarah had begged. There are other options. We could adopt. I want my own children, my own bloodline, not someone else's cast-offs. He had been cruel, he knew that. But he'd also been honest. His father had always taught him that a man's worth was measured by his legacy. Without children, what was the point? The following evening, Thomas and Victoria dined at Le Chateau, Greenwich's most exclusive restaurant. Victoria wore a new designer dress, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. I ordered the special invitations for our fertility announcement at the party, she said, her voice excited. They're little cards shaped like baby booties. We'll have the servers pass them out during your speech. Excellent idea, Thomas said. Everyone will be so happy for us, especially when they compare our joy to Sarah's empty life. Do you think she's coming to cause trouble? Victoria asked, sipping her champagne. Thomas shook his head. Sarah? Number, she's too proper for that. She's probably coming to show she's moved on or some nonsense. But seeing our perfect life, our beautiful home, and hearing about our future children will remind her of everything she lost. Victoria reached across the table to take his hand. We are perfect together, aren't we? Absolutely perfect, he agreed. The day before the party, Thomas stood in his great room watching staff transform it into a winter wonderland. Crystal decorations caught the light from the chandeliers, scattering prismatic reflections across the walls. Outside, professional decorators arranged thousands of white lights on the trees and bushes surrounding the property. His phone vibrated with a text message. Thomas frowned when he saw it was from Sarah. Looking forward to tomorrow night. I have something important to share with everyone. Thomas stared at the message, a flicker of unease passing through him before he dismissed it with a laugh. What could she possibly have to share that would matter to anyone? Darling, Victoria called from the entryway, the florist needs approval on the centerpieces. Thomas pocketed his phone. Tomorrow night would be perfect. His perfect wife, his perfect home, his perfect life on display for everyone, especially Sarah, to see and envy. Thomas stared at his phone screen for a long moment. What could Sarah possibly have to share? He shook his head and placed the phone on his nightstand. "Did you see this text from Sarah?" he asked Victoria, who was applying night cream to her face at her vanity table. Victoria barely looked up. What does she want now? She says she has something important to share with everyone tomorrow night. Victoria laughed, the sound sharp in the quiet bedroom. How desperate. She's probably got a new job or bought a house, something pathetically small that she thinks will impress us. "You're probably right," Thomas said, but a tiny knot formed in his stomach. He pushed the feeling away and turned off his bedside lamp. Morning arrived with weak winter sunlight streaming through the large windows of the Mitchell mansion. Thomas woke early, his mind already racing with the day's preparations. The Christmas party was only hours away. "I want everything perfect today," Thomas told Victoria over breakfast. Their private chef had prepared Belgian waffles, but Thomas only picked at his food. The caterers arrive at noon, the bartenders at 3, first guests at 6. Victoria nodded, scrolling through her phone. "My hairstylist will be here at 2, makeup at 3:30. She looked up with a smile. "I'll be wearing the red Valentino. It's perfect for making announcements." "Good choice," Thomas said. "When Sarah sees us together announcing our fertility treatment success, she'll finally understand how completely I've moved on." Victoria reached across the table to touch his hand. "You really want to hurt her, don't you?" Thomas didn't hesitate. "She deserves it. She held me back for years." Across town, in a modest but charming colonial house, Sarah Collins stood in front of her closet. She ran her fingers across the hangers, finally selecting a simple black dress. Her phone buzzed with a text from her friend Megan. "Are you sure you want to go to this party tonight?" Thomas is awful and Victoria is worse. Sarah smiled as she typed her reply. "Yes, it's time. Trust me." Another text arrived immediately. "I don't like this. He invited you to be cruel." Sarah's response was simple. "I know, but I'm ready." She laid the dress on her bed and walked to the bathroom to shower. In the mirror, she practiced calm, composed expressions. At 40, Sarah's face showed character rather than age, intelligence in her brown eyes, determination in the set of her jaw. Back at the Mitchell mansion, staff hurried through the rooms, transforming the already impressive home into a winter fantasy. Crystal icicles hung from chandeliers, white roses and silver ornaments adorned every surface. The massive Christmas tree in the great room sparkled with thousands of white lights and glass ornaments. Thomas inspected every detail, finding fault with the smallest imperfections. "The ice sculpture needs to be more central," he instructed the event coordinator, "and these appetizer trays should be sterling silver, not stainless steel." "Yes, Mr. Mitchell," the coordinator said, making notes, "and the seating arrangements are finalized as you requested." Thomas nodded. "Perfect. Make sure Sarah Collins is at table 7 with the families with young children." In the master suite upstairs, Victoria sat perfectly still as her stylist arranged her blonde hair in elegant waves. Her makeup artist waited nearby with an array of cosmetics. "I want to look flawless tonight," Victoria instructed. "Everyone will be watching us, especially when we make our announcement." "You'll be the most beautiful woman there," the stylist assured her. Victoria smiled. "I know." At 4 o'clock, Robert Daniels arrived at the mansion earlier than the other guests. The butler showed him to Thomas's study, where Thomas was reviewing notes for his welcome speech. "Robert, you're early," Thomas said, looking up from his desk. "I wanted to talk to you before everyone arrives," Robert said, declining Thomas's offer of a drink. "About Sarah." Thomas's face hardened. "What about her?" "I'm asking you as a friend and business partner. Don't humiliate her tonight," Robert said. It's beneath you. I'm just hosting a party, Robert, Thomas said with mock innocence. If Sarah feels uncomfortable seeing my successful life with Victoria, that's hardly my fault. Robert shook his head. We both know you invited her specifically to make her feel bad. I'm just saying, be careful. Cruelty has a way of coming back around. Thomas laughed. Save the fortune cookie wisdom, Robert. Sarah made her own bed when she failed to give me children. Tonight, she'll see exactly what she missed out on. Robert started to respond, but was interrupted by Victoria entering the study in her red dress, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. How do I look? She asked, turning slowly. Absolutely perfect, Thomas said, his attention shifting completely away from Robert's concerns. No one will be able to take their eyes off you. At 6 o'clock precisely, the first guests began to arrive. The Mitchell mansion glowed against the dark winter evening, lights twinkling in every window. Inside, staff circulated with trays of champagne and appetizers. A string quartet played Christmas music in the corner of the great room. Thomas and Victoria positioned themselves near the entrance, greeting each guest with practiced charm. Victoria's friend Elizabeth arrived early, air-kissing Victoria's cheeks. "This is magnificent," Elizabeth gushed, looking around at the decorations. "And you look stunning, Victoria. That dress." "Thank you," Victoria said. "We're so glad you could come. And wait until you hear our special announcement later." Elizabeth leaned closer. "Is Sarah Collins really coming tonight? I can't believe she had the nerve to accept." "Oh yes," Victoria said with a smile. "Thomas wants everyone to see how much better his life is now. With me." As more guests arrived, Thomas kept glancing at the door. The house filled with Greenwich's elite, banking executives, hedge fund managers, old money families. They all admired the decorations and complimented Thomas and Victoria on their beautiful home. At 7:15, Thomas checked his watch for the 10th time. "She's late," he muttered to Victoria. "Maybe she changed her mind," Victoria suggested. "She'll be here," Thomas said confidently. "She wouldn't miss the chance to show everyone she's fine after our divorce." In her car outside the Mitchell estate, Sarah sat quietly, gathering her thoughts. She checked her appearance in the rearview mirror, applied a fresh coat of lipstick, and took several deep breaths. "Just 3 hours," she said to herself. "You can do this." She checked her phone one last time, sending a quick text. "I'm going in now. Everything ready for 8:30? The response came immediately. "All set. Good luck." Sarah put her phone in her purse, stepped out of her car, and walked toward the brightly lit mansion. Music and laughter drifted through the open front door. She paused briefly at the entrance, then stepped inside. The butler announced her arrival. "Miss Sarah Collins." Thomas's head snapped up at the announcement. He immediately moved toward the entrance, Victoria at his side. Sarah stood just inside the door in her simple black dress. She wore a single strand of pearls and carried a small clutch purse. Her brown hair was arranged in a classic style that framed her face. Several guests nearby fell silent, watching the interaction with curious eyes. Everyone in their social circle knew the story of Thomas and Sarah's divorce. "Sarah," Thomas said loudly, his voice carrying to nearby guests, "how brave of you to come alone to such a family-oriented gathering." Sarah smiled politely, her composure perfect. "Thomas, Victoria, thank you for inviting me. Your home is beautiful." Victoria's smile was tight. "We're so glad you could make it. It must be nice to get out once in a while." "I stay quite busy, actually," Sarah said calmly. "But it's lovely to reconnect with everyone tonight." Thomas gestured to a passing waiter. "Champagne for our guest. Sarah, you remember the Andersons? They just had their 3rd child. A beautiful baby girl." "How wonderful," Sarah said, accepting the champagne and turning to greet the couple Thomas had pointed out. Thomas watched her, frowning slightly. He had expected her to look uncomfortable or upset. Instead, she moved through his party with easy confidence, greeting old acquaintances and making polite conversation. She seems fine, Victoria whispered to Thomas. Too fine. Do something. Thomas nodded, his jaw tightening. Don't worry. The night is young. By the time we make our announcement, she'll be completely devastated. Across the room, Robert watched the interaction with concern. He made his way to Sarah's side as Thomas and Victoria moved to greet other guests. Sarah, it's good to see you, Robert said sincerely. You look well. Thank you, Robert, Sarah said. It's good to see you too. I hope Thomas is being civil, Robert said quietly. Sarah smiled, glancing at her watch. Don't worry about me, Robert. I can handle Thomas Mitchell. In fact, she added, checking her phone as a text message arrived, the evening is about to get very interesting. Robert's eyebrows raised slightly. Interesting? What do you mean? Sarah just smiled and put her phone back in her purse. Just watch, Robert. Now, if you'll excuse me, I should mingle. Robert watched with concern as Sarah moved confidently through the crowded room. The Mitchell mansion buzzed with conversation and laughter. Waiters in crisp black uniforms offered trays of champagne and tiny appetizers on silver platters. Thomas spotted Sarah talking to an older couple and quickly moved to join them. Ah, Sarah, I see you found the Harrisons. Did they tell you about their new grandchild? Fifth one, isn't it, Jim? Jim Harrison nodded proudly. Little Emma, just 6 months old and already smart as a whip. How wonderful, Sarah said with a genuine smile. You must be very proud. Nothing compares to grandchildren, Mrs. Harrison added, touching Sarah's arm. Do you have any little ones yet, dear? Before Sarah could answer, Thomas jumped in. Oh no, Sarah never had children. Couldn't, actually. That's why I focused on my career instead, Sarah interrupted smoothly. I teach environmental science at Westbrook University now. Thomas frowned slightly, annoyed that Sarah had deflected his attempt to embarrass her. How fulfilling. Victoria and I believe career and family can coexist beautifully. In fact, we're expecting some exciting news on that front very soon. Sarah checked her watch, then nodded politely. If you'll excuse me, I need to make a quick call. As Sarah walked away, Thomas turned to Victoria, who had appeared at his side. She keeps checking her watch. She's uncomfortable. Victoria smiled. Good. I'll take it from here. Victoria followed Sarah to a quiet corner near the Christmas tree. Sarah had just put her phone away when Victoria approached. Sarah, I just love your dress. So simple, Victoria said loudly. I wanted to show you something. She pulled out her phone and displayed a photo. Our nursery design. What do you think? We're planning for twins. Several nearby guests turned to look. Sarah glanced at the phone, her face betraying no emotion. It's lovely, Victoria, Sarah said calmly. The blue and gold theme is elegant. Victoria frowned slightly, disappointed by Sarah's measured response. Well, we want everything perfect for when our fertility treatments succeed. We're at the best clinic in New York. Dr. Phillips says everything is on track. Sarah nodded. I'm happy for you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I see an old friend. Across the room, Thomas watched the interaction with frustration. Sarah's composure was not part of his plan. She's not taking the bait, Thomas muttered to Robert, who had joined him by the bar. Maybe because there shouldn't be bait, Robert replied. This whole setup is cruel, Thomas. Sarah is handling herself with dignity. You could learn from her. Thomas scowled. You don't understand. She needs to see what she lost. Or maybe you need to prove to yourself that you made the right choice, Robert said quietly. Before Thomas could respond, a waiter accidentally bumped Thomas's arm, spilling wine on his sleeve. As Thomas snapped at the apologetic server, Robert walked away, heading toward Sarah. Holding up okay? Robert asked her quietly. Sarah smiled. Better than expected. What time is it? 7:55, Robert answered, checking his watch. Are you waiting for someone? Something like that, Sarah said, sending another text message. Thomas approached, his sleeve now dabbed dry. Dinner is about to be served. Sarah, You're at table 7. Let me show you." He led her to a round table in the center of the dining room. 5 couples were already seated, all with wedding rings and smartphones displaying photos of young children as screensavers. "Sarah, you know the Blakes, the Turners, the Millers, the Prestons, and the Joneses, don't you?" Thomas asked loudly. "They all have such beautiful families." The couples greeted Sarah with varying degrees of warmth. Mrs. Miller immediately started showing photos of her twin toddlers. "They just turned 3 last month. Do you have children, Sarah?" Thomas lingered nearby, waiting for Sarah's response. "No, I don't," Sarah said simply, accepting the seat a waiter pulled out for her. "Oh, that's too bad," Mrs. Miller said. "Children are life's greatest blessing." Mr. Blake jumped in. "Our son just started kindergarten. He's already reading at a 2nd grade level." One by one, each couple shared stories and photos of their children. Thomas watched from nearby, a satisfied smile on his face. Sarah participated in the conversation with polite interest, occasionally checking her phone under the table. Victoria's friend Elizabeth approached the table, champagne glass in hand. She stood behind Sarah's chair. "Sarah Collins," Elizabeth said loudly. "It's been ages. You look, well, considering everything." Sarah looked up with a calm smile. "Elizabeth, nice to see you too." Elizabeth leaned down, her voice carrying to the entire table. "I've always wondered, why didn't you and Thomas have children? Was it a choice, or—" An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Thomas, still hovering nearby, smiled slightly. Sarah took a sip of water before answering. "Sometimes life has different plans than we expect, Elizabeth. What matters is how we adapt to those changes." Several people at the table nodded in agreement. Mrs. Preston even reached over to touch Sarah's hand supportively. Elizabeth looked disappointed by Sarah's composed response. "Well, Victoria is just thrilled about starting a family with Thomas. They're at the best fertility clinic in the country." "So I've heard," Sarah said, checking her watch again. "Excuse me, I need to send a quick message." As Sarah took out her phone, Thomas stepped forward to the center of the room, clinking a fork against his crystal champagne glass. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. "Friends, family, esteemed colleagues," Thomas began, his voice carrying throughout the room. "Victoria and I are so pleased to welcome you to our annual Christmas celebration." Victoria moved to stand beside him, taking his hand and beaming at the assembled guests. "The holiday season is a time to reflect on what truly matters in life," Thomas continued. "Family, legacy, the continuation of our bloodlines through future generations." His eyes found Sarah at table 7. She met his gaze steadily. "Some of us understand the profound importance of creating a family legacy," Thomas said pointedly. "Victoria and I are excited to announce that our fertility treatments are progressing well, and we hope to welcome the next generation of Mitchells very soon." Guests applauded. Victoria smiled broadly, waving like a queen. Thomas kept his eyes on Sarah, waiting for her reaction. Sarah's phone buzzed with a new message. She glanced down, read it, and a small, confident smile spread across her face. "Two family legacies," Thomas concluded, raising his glass and looking directly at Sarah. Everyone raised their glasses. Sarah did too, her smile unwavering. Thomas frowned slightly. This wasn't how he had expected Sarah to react. She should have been uncomfortable, embarrassed, possibly even tearful. Instead, she appeared almost pleased. As waiters began serving the first course, Thomas pulled Victoria aside. "Something's not right. She keeps checking her phone and smiling. She's supposed to be miserable." Victoria frowned. "Maybe she's pretending to get messages to seem important? Or she has a date later?" "Find out," Thomas demanded. "Talk to her again." Victoria approached Sarah's table as dessert was being served. "Sarah, you keep checking your phone. Hot date waiting?" Sarah looked up calmly. "No, Victoria. Just confirming some arrangements." "Arrangements?" Victoria asked, her voice laced with false sweetness. "For what?" Sarah checked her watch once more. "You'll find out very soon." Victoria returned to Thomas, who was watching from across the room. "She says she's confirming arrangements and we'll find out soon. What does that mean?" Thomas's face darkened. "I don't know, but I don't like it." Sarah excused herself from the table and walked to a quiet corner of the room. She made a brief phone call, her back to the party. When she turned around, she caught Thomas's eye across the room. Sarah smiled and mouthed silently, "Countdown begins now." Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. He started to move toward her, but was intercepted by guests wanting to discuss business. By the time he extracted himself, Sarah had returned to her table. The party continued. The string quartet played Christmas carols. Guests mingled and chatted. Thomas kept one eye on Sarah, who appeared increasingly relaxed and confident as the evening progressed. At precisely 8:25, Sarah checked her watch one final time and smiled. She stood up from her table and walked toward the restroom. As she passed Thomas, she paused. "Your speech about legacy was very moving, Thomas," she said. "I've been thinking a lot about legacy myself recently." Thomas narrowed his eyes. "What's going on, Sarah? What are these arrangements you keep checking on?" Sarah smiled. "5 more minutes, Thomas. Then everyone will know." Thomas watched Sarah walk away, his face flushed with anger. 5 minutes? What was she planning? The confident look in her eyes unsettled him. "What did she say to you?" Victoria appeared at his side, her red dress drawing admiring glances from nearby guests. "Something about everyone knowing in 5 minutes," Thomas said. "She's up to something." Victoria clutched his arm. "Should we be worried?" "Of course not," Thomas snapped, though uncertainty crept into his voice. "What could she possibly do? This is our house, our party." Across the room, the photographer Thomas had hired approached him. "Mr. Mitchell, shall we start the family portraits now? The lighting in the foyer is perfect." Thomas's expression brightened. "Yes, perfect timing. Victoria, gather everyone together." Victoria clapped her hands to get attention. "Everyone! We're taking family portraits by the Christmas tree. Each family together, please." Guests began moving toward the massive tree in the foyer. Sarah returned from the restroom just as the photographer was setting up. "All right, the Williams family first," the photographer called. A couple with 3 children arranged themselves in front of the tree. The photographer took several shots, then called the next family. Thomas spotted Sarah watching the proceedings. He approached with a wide smile. "Sarah, you can step aside for this part," he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "These are family shots, you understand?" Several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Robert, standing nearby, frowned deeply. Sarah checked her watch, 8:27, and smiled. "Of course, Thomas. I understand completely." Her calm response frustrated Thomas further. Why wasn't she embarrassed? He had deliberately set up the family portraits to highlight her childless state. "Victoria and Thomas next," the photographer called. Thomas and Victoria posed in front of the tree, his arm around her waist. Their smiles were perfect, practiced. "Beautiful couple," the photographer exclaimed, snapping multiple photos. "Mr. Mitchell, should we wait for your announcement before taking more photos of you two?" Thomas glanced at Sarah, who was checking her phone again. "Yes, actually. Everyone, if I could have your attention again." The guests quieted, turning toward Thomas expectantly. "Victoria and I have wonderful news to share," Thomas announced. "Our latest round of fertility treatments is showing extremely positive signs. We expect to announce a pregnancy very soon." Victoria looked startled for a moment. This wasn't entirely true, but quickly composed herself and smiled radiantly. "We're so excited to start our family," Victoria added. "The nursery is already being designed." Guests applauded and offered congratulations. Thomas watched Sarah for signs of distress, but she merely checked her watch again, 8:28, and sent another text message. Victoria moved through the crowd towards Sarah, her smile fixed in place. Sarah, I hope our news doesn't make you uncomfortable. Not everyone is meant to have children, after all. Several guests nearby fell silent, listening. Actually, Victoria, Sarah replied calmly, I believe everyone who wants children deserves that joy. I'm happy for you and Thomas. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. Well, Thomas and I are planning for at least 3 children. He always wanted a large family, you know, something you couldn't provide. Sarah's phone buzzed with a new message. She checked it, 8:29, and her smile widened. Actually, Victoria, I think you might be surprised about that. Excuse me. Sarah walked away, leaving Victoria confused and irritated. Thomas watched the exchange from across the room, his frustration mounting. Nothing was going according to plan. Robert approached Thomas, a glass of scotch in hand. Your announcement seemed premature. Is Victoria really pregnant? Not yet, Thomas admitted quietly. But it's just a matter of time. The doctors are very positive. So you lied to your guests to make Sarah feel bad, Robert said flatly. I simply accelerated the timeline a bit, Thomas replied. What's Sarah up to, Robert? She keeps checking her phone and smiling. Did she tell you anything? Robert shook his head. No, but whatever it is, she seems confident. Maybe you should be worried. About what? Thomas scoffed. What could she possibly do? Meanwhile, Elizabeth cornered Sarah near the bar. Sarah, we haven't really caught up. How are you really doing since the divorce? Dating anyone special? Sarah smiled politely. I'm doing very well, Elizabeth. My life has taken some unexpected but wonderful turns. Oh? Elizabeth leaned closer. Do tell. It must be hard seeing Thomas and Victoria so happy together, especially with their baby news. Not at all, Sarah said. I found that life often has perfect timing. Sarah checked her watch again, 8:30 exactly. Her phone buzzed with a final message. We're outside. Ready when you are. Sarah texted back. Perfect. Come to the front door in 15 minutes exactly. Elizabeth tried to peek at Sarah's phone. Secret admirer? Something much more important, Sarah replied. She excused herself and walked toward Thomas, who was speaking with a group of business associates. As she approached, she overheard one of the men say, Sarah seems to be doing remarkably well. I heard she got a major research grant at the university. Another added, she always was the gracious one. Remember how she handled the divorce? Never said a bad word about anyone. Thomas's face darkened as he noticed Sarah approaching. He quickly changed the subject. Gentlemen, more drinks? Sarah, joining us? Just briefly, Sarah said. I wanted to tell you I've received a text that's quite important. Expect a small addition to your party in about 10 minutes. Thomas's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? You didn't invite someone to my home without permission, did you? Sarah smiled. Let's just say I'm expanding your guest list slightly. Nothing to worry about. Before Thomas could respond, Victoria joined them, slipping her arm through Thomas's possessively. What's going on? Victoria asked, her voice sharp. Sarah says she's invited someone to our party, Thomas said, his tone incredulous. Victoria's face flushed with anger. You had no right to… It's just a small surprise, Sarah interrupted calmly. I think everyone will find it very interesting. She walked away, leaving Thomas and Victoria staring after her. Stop her, Victoria hissed. This is our house, our party. Thomas started to follow Sarah, but was intercepted by an elderly guest who wanted to discuss a potential investment. By the time Thomas extracted himself, Sarah was across the room, speaking quietly with Robert. She's planning something, Thomas told Victoria. Get the butler to watch the door. No unexpected guests are to be admitted without my approval. Victoria hurried off to find the butler. Thomas approached the bar, ordered a scotch, and downed it quickly. The confidence in Sarah's eyes had unnerved him more than he wanted to admit. Across the room, Robert and Sarah were having a quiet conversation. You seem very calm for someone who came to their ex-husband's party to be humiliated, Robert observed. Sarah smiled. Let's just say I came prepared. Does this have something to do with these mysterious text messages? Robert asked. Sarah checked her watch. 8:41. You'll see in about 4 minutes, Robert. I hope you'll still want to be Thomas's business partner afterward. Robert's eyebrows shot up. Now you've got me worried. Don't be, Sarah said, unless you've been keeping secrets too. Meanwhile, Victoria had found the butler and given him strict instructions. She rejoined Thomas near the grand staircase. The butler will stop any uninvited guests, Victoria said. Now, what do you think she's planning? I don't know, Thomas admitted, but whatever it is, it won't ruin our evening. At that moment, a hush fell over the nearest group of guests. Thomas followed their gaze to see Sarah standing alone in the center of the room, her phone in her hand. She appeared to be counting down silently, watching the time. Thomas started toward her, determined to put an end to whatever she was planning. But before he could reach her, the doorbell rang. The sound cut through the party noise like a knife. Conversation stopped. The string quartet paused between songs. All eyes turned toward the entrance. Who could that be? Someone asked. It's almost 9 o'clock. The butler appeared from the foyer, looking slightly confused. Mr. Mitchell, there are visitors at the door. They're asking for Miss Collins. Thomas froze. Victoria gripped his arm tightly. Tell them to leave, Victoria hissed. This is a private party. But Sarah had already moved toward the foyer. They're my guests, she said clearly. Please show them in. The butler looked to Thomas for instruction. Thomas hesitated, then nodded stiffly. Whatever game Sarah was playing, he would end it now. Fine, Thomas said loudly. Let's see who Sarah has deemed important enough to interrupt our party. The butler returned to the door. The party guests watched in curious silence. Thomas positioned himself near the entrance, Victoria at his side. They presented a united front, ready to face whatever Sarah had planned. Sarah stood nearby, a small smile playing on her lips. She checked her watch one final time, 8:45 exactly. Right on time, she whispered. The butler opened the grand entrance doors. The crowd fell silent as they strained to see the new arrivals. The butler stepped aside. A professionally dressed woman with short brown hair entered first. She appeared to be in her early 30s, wearing a gray pantsuit and carrying a large bag. Behind her came the real surprise. 4 small children walked in, holding hands in pairs. 2 boys and 2 girls, all identical in their features. They wore matching holiday outfits. The boys in tiny navy suits with red bow ties, the girls in red velvet dresses with white collars. All 4 had the same striking blue eyes, wavy brown hair, and, most notably, the same cleft chin that Thomas himself possessed. The entire party froze. 200 guests stood in complete silence, champagne glasses halfway to lips, conversations abandoned mid-sentence. The string quartet stopped playing, the bow of the violinist suspended in air. Thomas stared at the children, his face draining of color. Victoria gripped the back of a chair, her knuckles turning white. Sarah moved forward with a warm smile, kneeling to hug each child. "Thank you for coming, Miss Peterson," she said to the woman in the pantsuit. "Children, welcome to the party." She turned to face the stunned crowd. Her voice was clear and confident. "I apologize for being partially absent this evening," Sarah announced. "I had to ensure my children were properly settled with their nanny before joining us for dessert." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Sarah turned directly to Thomas, her eyes locked on his. "Thomas, I believe you haven't met your biological children yet." The whispers turned to gasps. Victoria swayed slightly, looking as if she might faint. Thomas stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing without sound. What is this?" he finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah placed her hands gently on the shoulders of the 2 children closest to her. "This is not a joke, Thomas. Remember our last round of fertility treatments? The ones we did right before you decided I was defective and left me? Well, they worked." More gasps from the crowd. Robert stepped closer, his eyes wide with shock. "I discovered I was pregnant 3 weeks after our divorce was finalized," Sarah continued. "Quadruplets, a medical miracle according to my doctors." One of the little girls looked up at Thomas curiously. "Are you our daddy?" she asked in a clear voice. "You look like the man in the pictures Mommy shows us." Thomas took an unsteady step backward. The physical resemblance between him and the children was undeniable. Each child had his distinctive blue eyes and cleft chin, the same Mitchell family traits his father and grandfather had possessed. "That's impossible," Victoria said, her voice high and strained. "You're lying. This is some kind of sick joke." Sarah shook her head. "No joke, Victoria. DNA tests confirmed Thomas is their biological father. All the documentation is with my lawyer." She turned to the children. "Children, please introduce yourselves properly." The children stepped forward one by one, well-behaved and poised. "I'm Emma Mitchell Collins," said the first girl. "I'm 4 years old." "I'm Ethan Mitchell Collins," said one of the boys. "I'm 4 years old too." "I'm Olivia Mitchell Collins," said the second girl. "We're all 4. "I'm Noah Mitchell Collins," said the last boy. "I like your Christmas tree." Victoria collapsed into a nearby chair, her face ashen. Several women rushed to her side, offering water and fanning her with napkins. Thomas still hadn't moved. His eyes darted from one child to another, seeing his own features reflected back at him 4 times. "This isn't possible," he whispered. "You couldn't have children." The doctors said it was unlikely, not impossible," Sarah corrected him. "And clearly they were wrong." The nanny, Miss Peterson, stepped forward. "Ms. Collins, the children should have their dessert and then get ready to leave. It's getting late for them." Sarah nodded. "Of course." "Children, would you like some cake?" The 4 nodded eagerly. Sarah guided them toward the dessert table, leaving Thomas standing alone in the center of whispering, staring guests. Robert approached Thomas slowly. "Tom, you okay?" Thomas didn't respond. His eyes followed the children as they selected desserts, their movements synchronized in the way only identical siblings could be. "Did you know about this?" Thomas finally asked Robert, his voice hollow. Robert shook his head. "No, I had no idea. None of us did." Across the room, Elizabeth had abandoned Victoria and was now hovering near Sarah and the children, her expression a mixture of shock and delight at being at the center of such dramatic news. "They're beautiful, Sarah," Elizabeth said loudly. "Such perfect little Mitchells. Anyone can see the family resemblance." Sarah smiled politely. "Thank you, Elizabeth. They're wonderful children." "And to think," Elizabeth continued, her voice carrying, "all this time Victoria has been going through fertility treatments when Thomas already had 4 children he abandoned." Victoria let out a small cry from her chair. The guests around her stepped back, creating distance. Thomas finally broke from his frozen state and marched toward Sarah. "We need to talk. Privately. Now." Sarah nodded calmly. "Miss Peterson, please watch the children for a moment." She followed Thomas into his study, closing the door behind them. The moment they were alone, Thomas exploded. "What the hell is this, Sarah? Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah stood straight, her composure unshaken. "Tell you? When exactly should I have told you, Thomas? When you were calling me defective? When you were leaving me for a younger woman specifically because I couldn't give you children? Or perhaps at your wedding to Victoria 6 months after our divorce?" "They're my children!" Thomas shouted. "You had no right to keep them from me." "Lower your voice," Sarah said firmly. "The children will hear you. And yes, they are your biological children, but you made it very clear that I wasn't good enough to be your wife. Why would I subject innocent children to a father who could so easily discard their mother?" Thomas ran his hands through his hair, pacing the study. "This changes everything. They're Mitchells. They're my heirs. They have rights to—" "Your money?" Sarah finished for him. "Is that what you're worried about right now? Not that you have 4 beautiful children you've never met?" Not that you've missed 4 years of their lives?" Thomas stopped pacing. For the first time that evening, uncertainty crept into his expression. "They look like me," he said quietly. "Yes, they do," Sarah agreed. "Emma has your stubborn streak too. Ethan has your head for numbers. Olivia is artistic. Noah is the peacemaker." Thomas looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. "You raised 4 children by yourself." "I had help," Sarah said. "My parents. My friends. A good nanny. But yes, I've been their only parent." "Why now?" Thomas asked. "Why bring them here tonight?" Sarah's expression hardened slightly. "Because you invited me here to humiliate me, Thomas. To show off your perfect life with Victoria, to remind me of my failure to have children. I decided it was time for the truth." Outside the study, the party had descended into chaos. Guests whispered in small groups, some already leaving. Victoria remained seated, her friend attending to her while shooting glances toward the study door. The children sat at a table eating cake, seemingly oblivious to the drama surrounding them. They were well behaved, using napkins and taking small bites. Robert stood near them, watching with a mixture of amazement and concern. One of the little boys, Ethan, looked up at him curiously. "Are you friends with our daddy?" Ethan asked. Robert hesitated. "Yes, I've known your father for a long time." "Mommy says he's been very busy," Ethan said seriously. "That's why he never visited us before." Robert's expression softened. "Well, I think he'll want to spend time with you now." In the study, Thomas had moved to the window, staring out at the darkness. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "Now we establish a reasonable co-parenting arrangement," Sarah said. "The children know about you. I've never spoken badly of you to them. They have your pictures in their rooms. They're excited to meet their father." "And what about Victoria? Our life together? Our plans?" Thomas asked. Sarah shrugged. "That's for you and Victoria to figure out. My concern is the children." The study door opened suddenly. Victoria stood there, her face tear-streaked but her eyes cold with fury. "You planned this," she said to Sarah. "You deliberately humiliated us in front of everyone who matters." "No, Victoria," Sarah replied calmly. "Thomas planned to humiliate me. I simply revealed the truth." Victoria turned to Thomas. "Did you know? Have you been lying to me all this time?" "No!" Thomas protested. "I had no idea. Sarah never told me." "With good reason," Sarah added. Victoria looked between them, then focused on Thomas. 4 children. 4. Do you have any idea what this means? They have claims to your estate. Claims that come before any children we might have. Thomas hadn't considered this. His face showed the dawning realization. "We need to talk to our lawyer immediately," Victoria continued. "There must be something we can do to protect our interests." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Our children are not an interest to be protected against, Victoria. They're Thomas's legitimate heirs." Victoria glared at Sarah. "You've ruined everything." "No," Sarah said firmly. "Thomas ruined our marriage when he discarded me for being defective. I simply moved forward with the life I was given, which included 4 beautiful children." She checked her watch. "It's getting late. The children need to go home. We've all had enough excitement for one evening." Sarah opened the study door and walked out, leaving Thomas and Victoria staring after her. In the main room, the party had largely disintegrated. Many guests had already left. Those remaining watched in fascination as Sarah approached the children. "Time to go home, darlings," she said gently. "Say goodnight to everyone." The children stood obediently. As they gathered their small coats, Emma looked around the room. "Where's our daddy?" she asked clearly. "We didn't really get to meet him." Every remaining eye in the room turned to the study door, where Thomas now stood, his face pale, watching his children prepare to leave. Thomas took a hesitant step forward, then another. The remaining guests parted silently. creating a path between him and the children. Emma, the boldest of the quadruplets, watched him approach with curious blue eyes. His eyes. "Hello," Thomas said, his voice unusually soft. Yes, I'm your father." The words felt strange in his mouth. Father. He had wanted that title for so long, had blamed Sarah for denying him this role. Now he stood before 4 children who shared his blood, his features, his name, children whose existence he had never suspected. Emma studied his face carefully. "You look like us, especially the chin." She touched her own small chin with its distinctive cleft. Noah, the quietest of the 4, stepped slightly behind Sarah, peeking around her leg. Ethan stood straight, watching Thomas with the same analytical gaze Thomas often used in business meetings. Olivia tilted her head as if trying to solve a puzzle. "Do you live in this big house?" Olivia asked, looking around at the crystal chandeliers and expensive decorations. "Yes," Thomas answered, unsure what else to say. "It's very fancy," Olivia continued. "Our house is smaller, but it has a tree house." Victoria appeared beside Thomas, her makeup smeared from tears, but her posture rigid. "Thomas, our guests are leaving. We need to address this situation privately." "Not now, Victoria," Thomas said, his eyes never leaving the children. From across the room, a crystal glass shattered as someone dropped it. The sound broke the spell of silence, and suddenly the room filled with whispers. "They're definitely his. Look at those eyes." Poor Victoria. Sarah raised them alone all this time. Elizabeth moved through the clusters of guests, her voice carrying deliberately. "Victoria told me they've spent thousands on fertility treatments. Can you imagine? All while these 4 existed." Thomas heard none of it. He knelt down slowly, bringing himself to eye level with the children. "I didn't know about you," he said quietly. "Your mother never told me." "Because you were mean to her," Emma said with 4-year-old directness. "You said she was broken, but she wasn't." Thomas flinched. Sarah placed a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. "Emma, remember what we discussed about speaking kindly," Sarah said. "Sorry," Emma said, not looking very sorry at all. "Mommy says we should always be truthful but nice." Victoria let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. "This is absurd. This entire charade is—" "Not now, Victoria," Thomas repeated more firmly this time. Robert approached, stopping beside Thomas. "The Hendersons are leaving. The Blakes, too. Most of the guests are making excuses to go." "Let them," Thomas said, still focused on the children. "Cancel the rest of the evening." Victoria's eyes widened. "Thomas! We can't just end our annual Christmas party because of this disruption." "It's more than a disruption, Victoria," Thomas said, standing up slowly. "These are my children." The weight of those words seemed to hit Victoria fully for the first time. She stepped back, her hand at her throat. "Your children," she repeated. "Your heirs. Your legacy." Her voice rose with each word. "What about our children, Thomas? The ones we've been planning for? The ones I've been taking hormones for, enduring treatments for?" Several remaining guests watched the scene unfold with undisguised interest. Victoria was losing control very publicly. "We need to discuss this privately," Thomas said. "Why?" Victoria demanded. "Everyone already knows. Your ex-wife made sure of that." Sarah signaled to Ms. Peterson, who began gathering the children's coats. "It's time for us to leave," Sarah said. "The children need their sleep." Thomas turned to her, suddenly panicked. "You're taking them? Now?" "Yes, Thomas," Sarah replied calmly. "It's past their bedtime. They're 4 years old. They need routine." "But I've just met them," Thomas protested. "I have questions. We need to talk about arrangements." "And we will," Sarah assured him, "but not tonight. Tonight has been overwhelming for everyone, especially the children." Thomas looked at the 4 small faces watching him with varying degrees of curiosity and wariness. They did look tired now, despite the excitement. Noah was leaning against Ms. Peterson, eyelids drooping. "When can I see them again?" Thomas asked. Sarah handed him a business card. "Call my lawyer tomorrow. We'll set up a proper meeting in a neutral setting." Victoria snatched the card from Thomas's hand. "A lawyer? Already? Of course, that's where this is going. Money." Sarah's expression hardened slightly. "No, Victoria. This is about establishing appropriate boundaries and expectations. The children's welfare comes first." Thomas took the card back from Victoria.